What happens when sleep is no longer a necessity, when the veil of dreams is lifted and the darkness within is set free? Picture this. The year is 1947, deep within the confines of a secret Soviet test facility. A chilling experiment is about to unfold. 5 prisoners, selected for their resilience, were promised freedom in exchange for participation in a 30-day sleep deprivation trial. The purpose? To test a newly developed sleep-inhibiting stimulant. These men, Vova, Gev, Alexe, Semyon, and Nikita, were confined in a sealed gas chamber, the stimulant administered continuously. Their quarters were modest: beds, dry food, water, books, and a toilet. Their only link to the outside world, a porthole window. A simple enough setup, one might think. But as the days turned into nights, and nights into days, the lines of reality began to blur. And so, the stage was set for an experiment that would challenge the very boundaries of human endurance and sanity. The experiment started out like any other, but soon the darkness began to creep in. The first 5 days were uneventful, with our 5 prisoners, Vova, Gev, Alexe, Semyon, and Nikita, adjusting to their new environment. They chatted, read books, and seemed to accept their predicament, believing in the promise of freedom that lay at the end of the 30-day trial. However, as the days rolled on, the atmosphere within the chamber began to shift. The conversations among the prisoners took on a dark and sinister tone. The walls of their confinement seemed to be closing in, and the effects of the sleep-inhibiting stimulant began to show. By the 9th day, the eerie tranquility was shattered. Semyon, in a fit of madness, began to scream. His screams echoed through the chamber, a chilling testament to the horrors that were beginning to unfold. For 3 long hours, his cries filled the air, only ceasing when he had torn his own vocal cords. Meanwhile, the other prisoners seemed oblivious to Semyon's torment. They were lost in their own worlds, trapped in a state of hallucination, their minds twisted by the relentless effects of the stimulant. They showed no reaction, no empathy, and no fear. Instead, they tore pages from their books and smeared their feces on the porthole windows, blocking the researchers' view into their twisted reality. Faced with these disturbing developments, the researchers were left with no choice but to enter the chamber. They were stepping into the unknown, into a world shaped by their own creation. They had no idea what awaited them within those sealed walls. They turned off the stimulant, readying themselves for whatever lay ahead. Unprepared for the horrors that awaited them, the researchers steeled themselves to face the consequences of their experiment. What they found inside the chamber was a scene straight from a nightmare. The once sterile environment, now a grotesque tableau of human depravity. Gev lay lifeless, a pool of his blood seeping into the cold, hard floor. The remaining 4 had engaged in unthinkable acts of self-mutilation. Vova, the strongest of the lot, had torn open his own chest, his hands a crimson testament to his ungodly strength. Nikita, once a quiet man, had stripped the flesh from his limbs, his bones protruding like grotesque sculptures. Semyon, the one who had first screamed, was a horrifying sight, his own organs removed in a ghastly display of self-destruction. And Alexe, his devilish grin twisted in perverse delight, was feasting on his own body. In the face of such horror, the researchers decided to abort the experiment, calling for military aid to evacuate the prisoners. But the horrors had only begun. The prisoners, now more monsters than men, turned violently against their would-be saviors. They fought with a strength and ferocity that seemed impossible, ripping out a soldier's throat and injuring another. Their resistance was not the only shocking revelation. They exhibited extreme strength, an uncanny resistance to sedatives, and a desperate craving for the sleep-inhibiting stimulant. It was as if the stimulant had unlocked a primal, monstrous side of their humanity. And there was another chilling discovery. Sleep was now their enemy. Nikita succumbed to the lure of slumber, and upon closing his eyes for the last time, he breathed his last, leaving only 3 prisoners in the living nightmare. Despite the gruesome scene and the shocking revelations, the military officials ordered the continuation of the experiment, a decision that met with vehement protests from the researchers. But their pleas fell on deaf ears, and the remaining prisoners were sealed back into the chamber, the stimulant once again coursing through their veins. In the face of such unspeakable horror, the experiment was deemed a failure. But the nightmare was far from over. In a twist of fate, the experiment was ordered to continue, plunging the survivors back into the heart of darkness. Against the will of the researchers, the prisoners were once again to be sealed within the chamber. Alexe, the one who had been feasting on his own flesh, fell asleep and met his gruesome end. His death was swift, the life snuffed out of him as if a candle in the wind. The grim reality was becoming abundantly clear. Sleep, it seemed, was the thin line between life and death for these unfortunate souls. Meanwhile, the military commander, unfazed by the ghastly deaths, ordered 3 researchers to be sealed in the chamber with the remaining prisoners, Vova and Semyon. A sense of dread filled the air, a palpable fear of what was to come. The researchers, driven to the edge, were about to be thrown into the very heart of the nightmare they had created. In a shocking turn of events, one of the researchers, a man of science pushed to his limits, pulled out a gun. He shot the commander and Semyon in the head, refusing to submit to the horrifying command. The chamber echoed with the sound of the gunshots, a stark reminder of the madness that the experiment had induced. Now, there was only Vova left. His eyes held a haunting gleam, a chilling reflection of the horror that had unfolded. The researcher, his hands trembling, asked Vova, "What are you?" Vova laughed eerily, a sound that crawled under the skin, and said, "We are the inherent evil inside the human mind that is kept in check by the act of sleeping." His words hung in the air, a chilling revelation of the terrifying depths of the human psyche. Upon hearing this, the researcher shot him in the heart, putting an end to the experiment once and for all. In the end, the experiment not only revealed the horrifying effects of sleep deprivation, but also the chilling depths of the human psyche. Sleep, it seems, does more than just restore our bodies. It keeps the monsters within us at bay.